I'd like to show you some things to help you with your long distance plug casting technique. And when we're talking about long distance plugging, we're talking about casts in the 150 yard range. There's some very specific things you need to do when you cast a plug to be able to reach the 150 yard range. The number one thing is to cause your lure to fly straight and like a dart. We're talking about very high launch velocities. If your plug tumbles, or if it even wobbles or waffles at the initial point of the flight, you're scrubbing tremendous amounts of airspeed off of that lure. I don't care how hard you throw that lure or how fast you initially launch it. If it's tumbling or if it's wobbling, you're going to scrub tremendous speeds off immediately, and that's going to greatly affect your distances. The first thing I want to do is show you a little puppet show about how a rod, the line, and the lure should travel to cause a lure to fly like a dart.
Okay, let's do a little puppet show a la Mr. Rogers. We're going to use a pencil for the rod and a little piece of wire for the line with a lure on the end of it. What you need to realize is when you cast, there's two arcs of motion. There's the arc of motion of the rod, and there's also the arc of motion as the line and the lure cross over the top of the rod into their launch position. Now if you start with your rod in a horizontal position and your line and your lure hanging down in a vertical position, this is what happens. There goes the arc of motion of your rod. When you reach a certain point, the line and the lure start to scribe a very rapid arc of motion around the top of the rod. And when you launch, even though you're launching in the correct direction, that rotational moment is still acting on the lure. The lure tumbles over on the top of itself, causing it to wobble, spin, and tumble. Now suppose we start with our rod in a horizontal position and our line also in a horizontal position. This causes several good things to happen, especially if we can draw our rod forward as we start to rotate it. In this case, as we start to move our rod, the line and the lure do not have to scribe such a quick arc motion around the top of it. There's much less rotational force from the line and the lure, and when you go into the launch, the lure tends not to tumble over on the top of itself. It travels straight and like a dart. Well, how are we going to get that line into a horizontal position before we cast? Well, we're going to swing our rod in the air so that the line and the lure are traveling like a pendulum. When that pendulum of the line reaches a horizontal position, then we're in the proper place to start our actual forward cast.
Now I'd like to show you the inswing and the outswing from a front view. What we have is an outswing, an inswing, an outswing, and a forward cast. Now, the more you swing close to your rod, the more overhead your power stroke is going to be. I think you would have to technically call that a swinging unitech cast. The more you swing away from your rod to the side, the more sideways your power stroke is going to be. I think then you have to technically call that a pendulum cast. So those casts are very related. It all depends upon where you want to in and out swing and how far to the side that might be. Full pendulum casts are a very side related motion. That's somewhat dangerous to people that are fishing next to you, so it's tended not to be used a lot on crowded beaches. The pendulum cast probably generates a little more force, but the swinging unitech cast, which is more overhead, is certainly a safer cast for everybody and also a very effective cast. Now before I show you some yard casting, I want to talk a little bit about rods and motions. You're going to find to cast in this style, a longer rod will make it easier than a shorter rod. A longer rod allows for slower motions. The shorter the rod is, the quicker the motions have to be and the more critical the timing is. It's going to be much easier if you start out with a rod somewhere in the 12-foot range rather than a short rod in the 9-foot range. I want you to notice during the casting demonstration a few motions. Number one, of course, you'll notice the outswing and then the inswing. I want you to notice that on the inswing, the lure is almost horizontal to the ground. I want you to notice at that moment of the height of the inswing, I push into the lure and towards the backswing. This allows me to come forward with my body as I rotate my arms around. This does great things to enable that plug to travel like a dart. I also want you to notice that I don't pull my arms in when I make this cast. I see a lot of people trying to pull their arms in and flex their elbows, thinking they're applying more power. The proper motion here is almost a locked elbow, more of a grenade lob over the top of your head rather than throwing a wiffle ball type motion. Okay, let's do a little demonstration. Of course, you need lures that have the capability of reaching those kinds of distances. I think they have to be in excess of 2.5 ounces to carry 150 yards. They should be butt weighted and they should be very straight in line. They cannot be banana shaped or curved. Those will not travel straight like a dart. Here's a couple examples. This is a Roberts lure. Here is a Super Strike swimmer. Here's a popper style lure, once again very straight, very pointed in the butt end and streamlined. If you want to throw a metal, here's a T-hex that's very narrow, thick and heavy and straight. Here's an excellent metal also called an F14, butt weighted, straight, flies like a rocket. Well, there you have it. It's really not too complicated. I think in about a half an hour you can start to get the hang of this. You can really groove it in just a couple hours of work. There's a lot of fish out there outside the 50-yard range where a lot of people tend to fish. Where I go, which is the Pacific coast of Mexico, long distance plugging is the key to success. I think you should give it a try. It's a lot of fun.